You are not confused. You are being conditioned. The guilt you feel, the constant need to explain yourself, that isn't random emotion. It's a response pattern. If you understand what's happening, you'll stop second-guessing yourself overnight. If you don't, you'll keep apologizing for things that were never your fault. There is a specific mechanism that makes intelligent, empathetic people the easiest to control, and it operates below your awareness. It doesn't attack your logic. It rewires your nervous system. And once you see the sequence, you can't unsee it. Here's where it starts. Have you ever felt a mysterious sense of guilt or obligation towards a friend or boss, but couldn't explain why? According to psychologists, you might not be imagining it. You could be the target of a psychological stealth bomber. You are paying a hidden tax every single day. You do not pay it in dollars or cents. You pay it in sanity. You pay it in autonomy. You pay it in the sleepless nights spent wondering if you are the crazy one. This is the cost of your ignorance. Most people feel this weight, but never identify the source. They drift through their relationships and careers feeling perpetually indebted, apologizing for crimes they never committed. Stop and ask yourself why you feel the need to justify your existence to certain people. That feeling is not natural, it is manufactured. We call this Covert Emotional Manipulation, or CEM. Do not mistake this for a simple personality quirk or a relationship hurdle. Do not mistake it for someone just having a bad day. This is a strategic weapon. It is warfare designed for one specific purpose: to bypass your conscious radar and hijack your decision-making centers. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people refuse to face. You believe your decisions are your own. You believe you chose to stay late at work to help that struggling manager. You believe you chose to forgive that friend who betrayed you yet again. You tell yourself you did it because you are kind, because you are loyal. That is the lie you have been programmed to believe. The reality is much darker. Your emotional strings are being pulled from the shadows. You are operating on a script written by someone else. The most dangerous aspect of this weapon is its invisibility. It acts like a stealth bomber. It flies below the threshold of your awareness. It strikes before you even hear the engine. The damage is done before you realize you are under attack. If you look at your life right now and cannot identify the specific source of your anxiety or your guilt, you are already a casualty. You are walking through a minefield blindfolded while someone else holds the map. This is invisible to those who are not looking. The 99% will continue to view their interactions as random or organic. They will never see the strings, but you are here because you suspect the game is rigged. By the end of this briefing, you will undergo an irreversible shift. You will never view a conversation the same way again. You will see the invisible architecture that controls your social and professional interactions. You will see the weapon for what it is. But here is where the trap is set. To dismantle the weapon, you must first admit that it has been pointing at you the entire time. Let us strip away the polite illusions. You need to understand exactly what you are up against. Covert Emotional Manipulation, or CEM, is not a simple misunderstanding. It is not a communication issue. It is psychological warfare disguised as a relationship. Most people walk through life believing that influence is a straight line. You think that if someone wants something from you, they will ask for it. This naivety is exactly why you are losing ground. Standard persuasion happens in the daylight. If a salesman wants you to buy a product, you know his objective. His cards are on the table. You can use logic to counter his pitch. But CEM operates entirely in the dark. The person using it against you does not want a transaction. They want total capitulation. Focus on the word covert. This is where the lethality lies. If an enemy charges at you with a weapon, your survival instincts kick in. You fight back. But what happens when the enemy approaches you with a smile and a compliment? You lower your guard. You let them inside the fortress. This concealment of intention is what makes the manipulator appear benign or even benevolent, while they are actively sabotaging your autonomy. They do not attack your logic. Logic is hard to break. Instead, they bypass your intellect entirely to strike at the visceral centers of your brain. They target fear. They target obligation. They weaponize guilt. By the time your logical mind realizes what is happening, your emotional center has already surrendered. You are trying to solve a math problem while they are setting fire to the building. You must realize that this is an act of dominance. It is not about connection. It is not about love. It is about altering your reality to serve their agenda. They are rewriting the script of your life, and they have cast you as the supporting character in their own story. Stop making excuses for them right now. You tell yourself they are just complicated. You tell yourself they had a hard childhood. You tell yourself they do not mean it. These are lies. These are the sedatives you take to numb the pain of being controlled. You must adopt a zero hedge mandate. Recognize the calculated nature of this behavior. If you continue to view these actions as accidents, you will remain a victim. But if you see them as tactics, you can begin to mount a defense. This is not a social game. It is a siege on your mind. And to survive it, you need to understand the structural integrity of their weapon. But here is where the trap is set. To dismantle this weapon, you first have to see the three pillars that hold it up. To survive this, you must dismantle the machine to see how it works. You need to see the blueprints. This weapon rests on three specific pillars. If you miss even one, you remain a target. The first pillar is hidden intentions. This is the foundation of the trap. In standard warfare, you know who the enemy is. They wear a uniform. They stand on the other side of the line. But in covert manipulation, the aggressor never reveals their endgame. They cloak their desire for control in the language of care. They frame their demands as concern for your well-being. If you knew they wanted to dominate you, you would resist. So they hide the knife until it is already between your ribs. You are walking into a minefield thinking it is a garden because the signs have been removed. This brings us to the second pillar, and this is the one that catches the high performers. It is targeting feelings. Most people believe their intelligence is a shield. You think because you are rational, you are safe. That is a lie. In fact, your intelligence is often a liability. Smart people are excellent at rationalizing bad behavior. When the manipulator strikes your emotions, your guilt, your pride, your fear, your brain works overtime to explain it away. You construct a logical reason for their emotional abuse. Intelligence protects your ideas. It does not protect your nervous system. Your logic never even gets a vote in this election. The third pillar is the act of influence. Understand that this is not an event. It is a campaign. A single instance of manipulation is annoying, but covert emotional manipulation is an active, ongoing process. It is the slow drip of water that eventually splits the stone. It is the subtle comment made every morning that reshapes your self-image by evening. It is cumulative. It is a siege, not a raid. Now compare this triad to overt abuse. If someone screams in your face or threatens you physically, your biological alarms ring. Your adrenaline spikes. You prepare to fight or flee. Overt abuse triggers your defenses. The three pillars of covert manipulation do the exact opposite. They soothe your defenses to sleep. They convince you to lower the drawbridge so they can walk right in. You are not fighting a battle. You are being slowly colonized. Stop and look at your life. Look at your inner circle. Audit your relationships right now. Do not look for the person screaming at you. Look for the silence. Look for the person whose intentions are never quite clear. Look for the interactions that leave you feeling drained, confused, or guilty without a logical cause. If you find a relationship where the end game is hidden, the target is your emotions, and the pressure never stops, you are not in a relationship. You are in a siege. Think about the most lethal asset in modern aerial warfare. It is not the jet that flies the fastest. It is not the one that carries the most explosives. The most dangerous weapon is the one that is invisible to radar. This is exactly how covert emotional manipulation operates. It is a psychological stealth bomber. Most people believe they would spot a manipulator coming. You think you would see the red flags. You think you would hear the alarm bells. But you are wrong. True manipulation does not announce itself with aggression or threats. It does not trigger your defenses. It is designed specifically to glide past your emotional radar without making a sound. You are currently operating under 3 distinct layers of blindness. This is why you are vulnerable. The first layer is that you are unaware you are being manipulated. You believe your thoughts are your own. You believe your reactions are organic. You do not see the strings because the puppeteer is standing in the shadows. The second layer is that you are unaware of the method. Even if you feel something is off, you cannot name the weapon. You cannot defend against a strike you cannot identify. The third and deepest layer is that you are unaware of the motivation. You project your own empathy onto the manipulator. You assume they think like you. You assume they want peace or resolution. But they do not. They want control. This brings us to a terrifying reality. The attack vector does not look like warfare. It looks like love. It looks like mentorship. It looks like a deep, soulful friendship. This is the camouflage. The stealth bomber paints itself in the colors of your deepest desires. The manipulator studies your voids and fills them perfectly, just long enough to gain entry behind your walls. Detection is nearly impossible until the damage is irreversible. By the time the payload is dropped, your defenses are already dismantled. You are not fighting to keep them out. You are already trapped inside with them. The manipulator's greatest asset is not their intelligence. It is not their charm. It is your inability to see them for what they are. Stop and realize the gravity of this. Your ignorance of this mechanism is the only reason it works. As long as you are looking for an enemy who screams and shouts, you will be destroyed by the one who whispers. The silence is not peace. The silence is the weapon. And now that you know the bomber is in the air, you need to understand the flight path. You need to see the sequence they use to lock onto their target. You might believe that emotional chaos is random. You are wrong. Manipulation follows a rigid architectural structure. It operates on a timeline. We call this the sequential model of control. This is the blueprint for psychological enslavement. It does not deviate. It does not improvise. And the first step is the most dangerous because it feels the best. Society calls it love bombing. That term is too soft. It implies affection. Erase that definition. In the realm of covert emotional manipulation, this phase is strictly reconnaissance. It is a high-speed data-gathering mission. When a new person enters your life and immediately floods you with adoration, gifts, and mirror image validation, they are not falling for you. They are profiling you. They are mapping your insecurities. They are finding the void in your soul where you feel unseen or underappreciated. By filling that void instantly, they bind themselves to your sense of self-worth. It is a setup for total dependency. Notice the speed. Real connection is slow. It is built on the friction of reality. Manipulation is frictionless. It moves at the speed of a fantasy. This intensity is the red flag you ignore because it feels like a drug. You think it is fate. It is actually a Trojan horse. The manipulator presents a gift so overwhelming that you voluntarily lower your drawbridge. You invite the enemy into the keep. You hand over the keys to the castle because you are intoxicated by the sudden rush of being idolized. Stop and assess your past. Recall that moment when something felt too perfect, too fast. The person who understood you better than anyone else within 48 hours. You were not special to them. You were a target. You were being prepped for the slaughter. They were establishing a baseline of euphoria so that later, when they withdraw it, the crash will break you. This is not about romance. It is about leverage. By the time you realize the intensity was artificial, the hook is already set deep in your jaw. You are addicted to a version of them that never existed. And once they are certain you are addicted, once the drawbridge is down and the defenses are gone, the strategy shifts. The warmth evaporates. The sequence moves from acquisition to conditioning. Let us step back into the light of clarity for a moment. To understand the trap, you must understand the bait. This brings us to the second and arguably most deceptive phase of the sequence: positive reinforcement. Most people assume manipulation begins with criticism or cruelty. That is a fatal mistake. It begins with reward. The most effective cage is the one you walk into willingly because it feels like a sanctuary. Consider the biological reality of this. You are being trained exactly like a subject in a laboratory experiment. Think of the Pavlovian response. A bell rings, food is presented, and the subject salivates. After enough repetition, the subject salivates at the mere sound of the bell, even without the food. In this scenario, you are the subject. The manipulator is the scientist holding the clipboard. They are carefully observing you. They are identifying the specific behaviors that serve their agenda. Perhaps it is when you prioritize their emotional needs over your own schedule, or when you agree with their worldview despite your own doubts. Whenever you execute these specific actions, they flood you with the treat. This comes in the form of intense validation, praise, or a feeling of deep, synchronized connection. The danger here lies in consistency. At this specific stage, the rewards are not random. They are mathematically consistent. They have to be. To cement a habit loop in your brain, the feedback must be reliable. Action A must produce reward B every single time. This builds a physical neural pathway in your mind. You are being programmed to associate compliance with safety and pleasure. But here is the invisible tax you are paying. Pay close attention to this shift. The dynamic of the relationship is pivoting from being loved to earning love. In the beginning, their affection felt like a gift given freely. Now, it is quietly becoming a wage. You are working for it. You are subconsciously learning that your value is not intrinsic. Your value is now tied to your utility. If you make them happy, you are safe. If you serve their needs, you are worthy. This is why this phase is so lethal. It feels good. It feels like building a strong relationship. Your brain is flooded with dopamine, masking the reality of what is happening. You would never suspect you are entering a siege because the gates are open and the banquet is set. But make no mistake, you are being conditioned. You are being prepped for the moment the rewards are snatched away. And once that foundation of dependency is built, the rules of the game will change instantly. But here is where the trap is set. Up until this moment, The manipulator has been consistent. They have been the perfect mirror, validating your ego and soothing your insecurities. You feel safe. You feel seen. You believe you have found a stable source of validation. Now, the dynamic shifts. This brings us to the third and most lethal step in the sequence known as intermittent positive reinforcement. The rewards stop being consistent and become terrifyingly unpredictable. The affection you grew addicted to is suddenly withdrawn without warning and without explanation. This is not an accident. It is a calculated breach of the pattern your brain has learned to trust. When a reward is guaranteed every single time, your brain eventually grows bored. The dopamine levels plateau. You take it for granted. But when the reward becomes uncertain, your brain goes into overdrive. Neuroscience proves that the human brain releases significantly more dopamine anticipating an uncertain reward than it does receiving a guaranteed one. This is the biological flaw that keeps gamblers chained to slot machines. If you pulled the lever and won every time, you would walk away. If you pulled the lever and never won, you would walk away. But if you win just often enough to hope, but rarely enough to starve, you will stay until you are bankrupt. The manipulator turns themselves into that slot machine. You are no longer interacting with a person. You are pulling a lever, hoping for a payout of affection that comes at random intervals. When they withdraw, you panic. The silence is deafening. You do not blame them for being cold. You blame yourself. You ask what you did wrong. You reread old messages looking for the mistake you must have made. This triggers a frantic, primal need to restore the connection. You start working harder. You become more compliant. You lower your boundaries because you are desperate to see that green light of approval one more time. And when they finally give you a crumb of affection after a period of coldness, the relief is so intense that it feels like euphoria. You mistake this relief for love. It is not love. It is the chemical relief of a withdrawal symptom ending. Stop and realize what this actually means for your future. You are not fighting to save a relationship. You are chasing a dopamine hit engineered by a strategist who is watching you unravel. They control the schedule. They control the dosage. And as long as you are waiting for their validation, they own your reality. Most people never notice this shift until they are completely addicted to the cycle of pain and relief. You must see it now before the psychological hooks sink any deeper. But here is where the trap is set. You might think you can spot a cold shoulder. You might think you would walk away from obvious disrespect. But the master of covert emotional manipulation does not start with coldness. They start with heat. Consider the mechanism of the chasing game. It begins with a phase often called love bombing. For weeks, or perhaps months, you are the center of their universe. The validation is constant. The attention is intoxicating. You feel seen. You feel understood in a way you never have before. This is not accidental. This is the setup. They are flooding your brain with dopamine, creating a chemical dependency you do not even know exists yet. Then, the shift happens. It is subtle at first. A delayed text, a distracted glance. The praise stops. The validation vanishes. You feel a sudden, sharp drop in your internal status. You panic. Your brain, addicted to that initial rush of dopamine, screams for a fix. You instantly turn inward. You ask yourself, what did I do? How do I fix this? So you try harder. You become more attentive. You apologize for things you did not do. You scramble to regain their favor. And then, unpredictably, they give you a crumb, a smile, a kind word. The relief is overwhelming. You feel a rush of gratitude. You think you have saved the connection. You are wrong. You have just been conditioned. This is intermittent positive reinforcement. It is the exact psychological principle that keeps a gambler glued to a slot machine for 12 hours straight. If the machine paid out every time, the gambler would get bored. If it never paid out, they would leave. But because the reward is unpredictable, because you never know when the approval is coming, you keep pulling the lever. You keep chasing. You start to rationalize their behavior. You tell yourself they are just having a hard time at work. You tell yourself they are stressed. You invent excuses for their cruelty to protect the image of the person you thought they were. You are doing their work for them. This is invisible to those who are not looking. You are not chasing a person anymore. You are chasing a feeling. You are chasing the high of that first month. You are self-policing your own behavior, walking on eggshells, terrified to make a move that might cause the warmth to vanish again. You have become the perfect victim, addicted to the very source of your pain. And this brings us to a secret even more dangerous. Because once they have you chasing, they do not just control your actions. They begin to rewire your subconscious mind. You believe you are the captain of your own soul. You think you are staying in this situation because of loyalty, or hope, or perhaps even love. That is a lie you tell yourself to survive. The truth is far darker and strictly biological. Your brain is being hacked on a chemical level. This brings us to the third deep insight, which is the subconscious craving. Understand that logic has left the building. You are now operating on pure instinct. When a reward is predictable, you eventually get bored. When a reward is absent, you eventually leave. But when the reward is unpredictable, your brain enters a state of hyper-arousal. You are not relaxing. You are waiting. This is the exact same mechanism that keeps a gambler glued to a slot machine, even as he loses his house. The manipulator gives you breadcrumbs of affection or validation at random intervals. Your subconscious mind latches onto this instability. It begins to crave the spike of dopamine that comes only when the silence is finally broken. You are not in a relationship. You are in a withdrawal cycle. You must distinguish between conscious love and subconscious addiction. Love brings stability and growth. Covert emotional manipulation creates anxiety that disguises itself as passion. You mistake the intensity of your fear for the depth of your devotion. You feel a tightness in your chest when they pull away. You check your phone 100 times an hour. You feel like you physically cannot live without them. That is not romance. That is dependency. The manipulator knows that if they keep you starving, you will hunt for them. If they keep you anxious, you will work harder to please them, just to get that momentary hit of relief. This explains the most baffling behavior of all. Why do victims defend their abusers? Why do you make excuses for the person who is systematically dismantling your self-esteem? It is because your addiction protects the source of the drug. If you admit they are a monster, you have to cut off the supply. Your subconscious refuses to let that happen, so you rationalize. You tell yourself they are stressed. You tell yourself they had a hard childhood. You become the guardian of your own prison just to keep the dopamine drip flowing. Stop and look at your own desperation. Separate your feelings of need from genuine human connection. Ask yourself a brutal question. Do you want them because they add value to your life? Or do you want them because the pain of their absence is physically unbearable? That feeling of need is not a sign of a soulmate. It is a symptom of infection. But understanding the chemistry is not enough to save you. You need to know where this war is actually being fought, because this manipulation does not just stay in your head. It bleeds out into 4 specific battlefields that define your existence. And if you do not recognize the terrain, you have already lost the ground before the first shot is fired. You now understand the machinery of the mind. You see the sequential model and the addiction loops. But knowing how the weapon works is useless if you cannot recognize the terrain where it is deployed. The psychology of CEM does not exist in a vacuum. It requires a battlefield. And right now, whether you admit it or not, you are standing on 4 distinct battlefields simultaneously. You are fighting a multi-front war. Most people never realize this until they are already casualties. This form of control is a shapeshifter. It adapts to the environment. The core mechanism remains exactly the same, but the packaging changes to bypass your specific defenses in that moment. The predator merely changes the mask. First, there is the professional sphere. Here, manipulation wears a suit. It hides behind performance reviews and corporate hierarchy. It disguises itself as necessary feedback or ambitious mentorship. You accept abuse here because you confuse it with the price of success. Second is the personal sphere, your circle of friends. This is where your guard is often the lowest. You mistake subtle control for loyalty. You mistake passive aggression for concern. Because you trust these people, the manipulation enters your mind without resistance. Then there is the romantic sphere. This is the most kinetic front. It is high intensity. It is volatile. The highs are blindingly bright, and the lows are crushing. This is where the addiction we discussed earlier takes its strongest hold. It feels like passion, but it is actually a siege. However, do not be fooled by the noise of romance. The 4th battlefield is often the deadliest, the family unit. This is the most durable front. Romantic partners can be left, jobs can be quit, but family is blood. The manipulation here is ancient. It was installed before you could speak. It relies on history. It relies on guilt that has compounded over decades. While romantic manipulation burns hot and fast, family manipulation is a slow, cold suffocation. The mistake you make is thinking these are separate worlds. They are not. A manipulator at work uses your ambition against you. A manipulator at home uses your need for belonging. Same weapon, different ammunition. If you are vigilant in love but blind at work, you will still lose. If you dominate in business but play the victim at home, you are still under control. You must learn to spot the shapeshifter in every environment. We are about to dissect these 4 spheres one by one. We will strip away the context and show you the raw mechanics underneath. You need to see how this plays out when your paycheck is on the line. And you need to see how it looks when it comes from the people you claim to love. The first mask we will remove is the one worn by your colleagues. Most people assume emotional warfare is reserved for romantic entanglements or bitter enemies. That is a fatal calculation. The most dangerous operatives are often sitting in the cubicle next to you or buying you a round of drinks on a Friday night. In the professional world, CEM, or covert emotional manipulation, does not look like a screaming boss or a hostile coworker. It looks like silence. It looks like exclusion. It looks like vague feedback that leaves you questioning your own competence. Consider the mechanic of the silent disappointment. You hand in a project. Your boss does not criticize it. They simply pause. They look at you with a heavy, weary expression. Then they look away. No words are spoken. No direct order is given to redo the work. Yet panic sets in. You scramble to fix mistakes that were never identified. You stay late to prove your dedication. You over-deliver on tasks that were never assigned. You are dancing to music only they can hear. This is the efficiency of the invisible command. This brings us to the phenomenon of the mystery guilt. Think of that one friend in your circle. You know exactly who I am talking about. When you are around them, You feel a constant, low-level hum of obligation. You feel like you owe them something, but you cannot remember signing a contract. They never ask for favors directly. Instead, they sigh about their bad luck. They mention how overwhelmed they are while staring pointedly at your free time. History proves that the most effective tyrants rarely shout. They imply. They create a vacuum of approval, and your brain rushes to fill it. You become the enforcer of your own slavery. You find yourself cancelling plans to help them move. You take on the extra shift. You apologize for things you did not do. This is the weaponization of your own empathy. The manipulator knows you are a decent person. They know you value fairness. So, they create a counterfeit imbalance. They act as if they are the victim of your negligence. You rush to correct the balance. You pay a debt that does not exist. Notice the invisible commands. If you recorded the conversation, a court of law would say they asked for nothing. But your nervous system knows the truth. You are acting to appease a threat that has never been spoken aloud. They have bypassed your logic entirely and hacked directly into your social survival instincts. You are running a script they wrote, believing it is your own idea. But here is where the trap is set. While you exhaust yourself trying to decipher their vague signals, you are missing the real attack. They are not just wasting your time. They are conditioning you to seek their validation above your own reality. And once that circuit is closed, you are no longer a colleague or a friend. You are an asset. Now we enter the most dangerous terrain of all. You can quit a job. You can ghost a friend. But what happens when the manipulation is sleeping in your bed? This is the romantic siege. And it is where the psychology of covert emotional manipulation claims its most permanent victims. Most people imagine an abusive partner as a monster, someone who screams, throws plates, punches walls. That is amateur hour. That is overt aggression. And overt aggression is clumsy. It is risky. It leaves bruises. It alerts the neighbors. It forces the victim to realize they are in danger and run. The master of CEM does not make these mistakes. They do not want you to leave. They want to own you. Consider the mechanic of the invisible cage. The overt abuser builds a prison with steel bars. You can see them. You hate them. You plot your escape. But the covert manipulator builds a prison out of your own doubt. They operate like a psychological stealth bomber. They fly below the radar of your conscious mind. They drop their payload, and they vanish into the clouds before you even know you have been hit. You believe the relationship is normal. You believe you are the problem. You find yourself apologizing for things you did not do. This is the dark genius of their motivation. They want total control, but they also want the reputation of a saint. They want to drain your soul while their friends tell you how lucky you are to have them. They avoid the social stigma of being abusive by ensuring the abuse never looks like abuse. History proves this is effective. It is the boiling frog phenomenon, weaponized against your heart. If you throw a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. It survives because the threat is obvious. But if you put it in cold water and raise the temperature 1 degree at a time, it cooks to death, without ever trying to escape. You are that frog. The heat is rising. The snide comments disguised as jokes. The cold shoulder when you shine too bright. The subtle rewriting of your shared memories. They are conditioning you to accept less, to accept pain as love, to accept anxiety as passion. They bypass your natural defense mechanisms because there is no single moment of impact. There is no explosion, just a slow, suffocating erosion of who you are. And because you never see the attack coming, you never realize it is time to leave until your identity has been dismantled. You are trapped in a cage you cannot see, fighting a war you did not know you were fighting. and the person holding the key is the one telling you that you are crazy for thinking the door is locked. But if you think this is powerful, wait until you see how this dynamic shifts when blood creates the bond. And this brings us to a secret, even more dangerous. You might think you can escape a toxic partner or a bad boss. You can walk away. You can quit. But what happens when the manipulation is woven into your very DNA? This is the most taboo battlefield of all, the family unit. This is where the psychology of covert emotional manipulation finds its most fertile ground. We call this the family power multiplier. Most people assume that family is a sanctuary. That is the first mistake. For the master manipulator, family is not a sanctuary. It is a hunting ground where the prey is forbidden to leave. Consider the dynamic of the blood obligation. In the wild, a predator has to hunt you down and break through your defenses. In a family, the predator has the keys to your house. They do not need to break down your walls because they were there when the walls were built. You have been conditioned from birth to tolerate behavior from these people that you would never accept from a stranger. You are programmed to go the extra mile for blood, to forgive, to forget, to sacrifice your own well-being for the sake of the clan. The manipulator exploits this pre-existing social obligation with surgical precision. They do not need to build influence. They inherit it. This creates the power multiplier effect. A subtle guilt trip from a mother or a brother hits with 10 times the force of a guilt trip from a coworker. The impact is exponential because it targets your foundational programming. The manipulator layers their tactics on top of your inherent willingness to help. The result is total control. Notice the shift in your own mind when you try to resist. This is the double bind. When you fight back against a stranger, you feel strong. You feel righteous. But when you try to set a boundary with a family member using these tactics, you do not feel strong. You feel like a traitor. You feel like you are betraying your own identity and violating the sacred laws of honor and duty. Fighting the manipulator feels like fighting yourself. Stop and realize what this actually means for your future. If you cannot see this dynamic, you are a very malleable victim. The manipulator knows you are fighting a war on two fronts, one against them and one against your own guilt. They rely on your conscience to do their dirty work for them. Shared DNA is the ultimate camouflage for toxicity. It is the perfect cover story. Most people never notice this because they are too afraid to look at the truth. They prefer the comforting lie that blood requires submission. History proves this is false. The record shows a brutal truth. The people closest to you know exactly where to insert the knife because they helped measure you for your armor. But here is where the trap is set. You must learn to distinguish between this cold, calculated control and simple, hot-headed anger. Because if you confuse the two, you will lose the war before you even draw your weapon. You are making a critical mistake. You are scanning the horizon for a storm, but the threat is already in the room with you. There is a common delusion that manipulation is loud. You think it looks like a heated argument. You think it involves intimidation or physical dominance. If you are waiting for aggression, you will lose every single time. Let me shatter this myth for you right now. Aggression is not a sign of power. Aggression is a sign of weakness. It proves that the manipulator has lost control of the frame. The moment someone resorts to shouting or threats, they have admitted that their subtle influence has failed. They are desperate. They are panicking. True covert emotional manipulation does not need volume. It operates in the silence. It thrives in the unspoken. The most dangerous enemy you will ever face is the one who smiles at you while they are tightening the noose around your neck. You need to reframe your understanding of violence. In the world of psychological warfare, silence is an attack. Withdrawal is a weapon. When a master operator goes cold, they are not retreating. They are creating a vacuum. Your mind rushes to fill that vacuum with insecurity and doubt. You do the work for them. You tear yourself apart, wondering what you did wrong. Meanwhile, they have not raised a finger. They have not said a word. That is efficiency. That is control. The clumsy manipulator leaves bruises that you can show to your friends. They leave evidence. The master leaves you feeling crazy. When you try to explain what happened, you sound paranoid. You sound ungrateful. Because on the surface, they were calm. They were reasonable. You were the one who reacted. This is the invisible tax of ignorance. You are guarding the front gate against a barbarian horde while the assassin is already sitting at your dinner table. You must stop associating danger with anger. Anger is predictable. Anger is easy to counter. You can see it coming. But kindness used as a distraction is fatal. A gentle suggestion that makes you question your own memory is a scalpel that cuts the deepest. Do not fear the person who threatens to leave you. Fear the person who stays, but makes you feel entirely alone while they are sitting right next to you. This is how they dismantle your reality. They do not break down the door. They convince you to unlock it yourself. They maintain plausible deniability while you slowly unravel. But if you think this mechanism relies solely on punishment, you are missing half the picture. The trap is not just built on fear, it is built on something far more addictive. And this brings us to a secret even more dangerous. Most people think manipulation always looks like a frown. They believe it requires cruelty or cold silence to be effective. But here is where the trap is set. The most lethal form of control does not use a whip, it uses a pedestal. We need to dissect the nuance of positive reinforcement, because this is where the intelligent victims get caught. You might be looking for an enemy, but you are being dismantled by a savior. Consider the concept of the golden handcuffs. If a manipulator only offered pain, your survival instinct would eventually kick in. You would fight back, or you would run. They know this, so they handcuff you to their validation using intense, strategic pleasure. You stay in the relationship or the job not because you are afraid of the lows, but because you are chemically addicted to the highs. This creates a dependency that is far stronger than fear. You need to become forensic about the timing of the compliments you receive. This is the only way to see the invisible bars of the cage. Audit your interactions. When does the praise arrive? Does it come when you assert your boundaries? Does it come when you pursue your own goals or show independence? Almost certainly not. The validation is unleashed only when you submit. When you cancel your plans to accommodate them, you are called selfless. When you agree with their opinion against your better judgment, you are called wise. When you apologize for things you did not do, you are called mature. Do not mistake this for love. If the praise only appears when you surrender your autonomy, it is not praise. It is a payment. You are being bought. It is a strict transaction where you trade your identity for a temporary feeling of worth. This acts as a behavioral modification circuit. You begin to crave the reward so intensely that you subconsciously edit your own personality. You prune away the parts of yourself that do not trigger the reward mechanism. You stop speaking up. You stop disagreeing. You become a hollow vessel, waiting to be filled with their approval. This is the most dangerous phase because you believe you are happy. You believe you are loved. but you are simply well trained. The manipulator has turned you into a junkie for their attention. They withhold it just long enough to make you desperate, and then they flood your system with dopamine the moment you comply. It is biological warfare, waged inside your own nervous system. Now that you see the carrot is just as dangerous as the stick, you have to ask the hard question. How do you break a circuit that is wired into your own brain chemistry? How do you walk away when the cage door is open but you are too sedated to move? This brings us to the most difficult action you will ever have to take. You have seen the weapons, you have mapped the terrain, but knowledge without execution is just sophisticated paralysis. To break this circuit, you must perform the single most difficult act in psychological warfare. You must look at the person you trust, the person you want to believe in, and you must name the enemy. Call it what it is. The stealth bomber is no longer invisible. It is right above you, and you are the target. Most people stay trapped because they are solving a puzzle that does not exist. They think the manipulator is misunderstood. They think the inconsistency is a personal flaw they can help fix. You must realize 3 specific things right now to survive. First, accept that you are being manipulated, not influenced, not guided, manipulated. Second, identify the weapon. It is intermittent reinforcement. The unpredictable rewards are not signs of hope. They are the hook. Third, understand the motive. It is control, pure and simple. When you accept these 3 truths, the fog evaporates. You stop seeing a complex person and start seeing a simple strategy. You have been running on a treadmill, chasing a ghost. You crave that one moment of warmth that makes you forget the freeze. You analyze their texts. You dissect their glances. You convince yourself that if you just behave perfectly, the good version of them will return and stay. This is a lie. The good version is the bait. The inconsistency is the trap. Stop chasing the reaction. Accept that the chaos is deliberate. When you realize the confusion is manufactured, you stop trying to solve it. You stop negotiating with a terrorist who has no intention of releasing the hostages. And this leads to the most critical shift in your internal dialogue. For too long, you have been asking, why are they doing this? That question keeps you focused on them. It keeps you empathetic. It keeps you weak. You need to kill that question. Replace it with this one. What is this doing to me? Look at your anxiety. Look at your depleted energy. Look at the sleepless nights spent decoding silence. Look at how small you have become, trying to fit into their game. When you look at the damage instead of the intent, the spell breaks. You stop being a detective and you become a judge. You are no longer willing to pay the tax. The cost of admission to their life is your sanity, and you are finally closing your wallet. You are standing at the exit door. The game is exposed. The mechanics are laid bare. But simply leaving the table is not enough. You need to make sure you never sit down at a game like this again. To do that, you must undergo one final transformation. You have walked through the fire and dismantled the machinery of control, piece by piece. Think back to where you were just a short time ago. You were operating in a fog. You felt the heavy weight of obligation and the sharp sting of guilt. But you could not see the hand that was placing it there. That blindness is gone. You now possess the tactical map to your own psychology. You understand that covert emotional manipulation is not an accident. It is not a personality quirk or a misunderstanding. It is warfare. It is the strategic deployment of silence, praise, and fear, designed to hollow you out and replace your will with theirs. But here is the shift that changes your entire future. The moment you name the weapon, it loses its edge. The moment you see the sequence, the addiction breaks. The ghost in the machine has been exposed. Look around you with these new eyes. The strings are now visible. You will see them in the sudden coldness of a partner. You will see them in the backhanded compliment of a colleague. You will see them in the calculated guilt trip of a family member. Before today, these moments triggered anxiety. They triggered a desperate need to fix things. Now, they will only trigger analysis. You are no longer a participant in their drama. You are a scientist observing a specimen. You are a general watching the enemy reveal their position. This is the ultimate state of freedom. You do not need to fight them with aggression. You do not need to scream or defend yourself. Real power does not need to raise its voice. You simply need to see. When they withdraw affection to make you chase, you stand still. When they deliver a random reward to keep you hooked, you recognize the bait for what it is. You refuse to bite. Walk into your next interaction with this armor. Watch how they scramble when the old buttons do not work. Watch how the dynamic shifts when you do not react with fear. Most people will spend their entire lives dancing to a tune they cannot hear. They will chase validation until they are empty. That is no longer your fate. You have stepped out of the game. The panic is replaced by clarity. The confusion is replaced by certainty. You possess the rarest asset in the modern world. You possess your own mind. Do not let them rent space in it, ever again. The puppet show is over. The strings are cut. Observe the game. Detach from the outcome. Reclaim your reality.